Well, let's see. Ruby's asked me to say a few things about Reuben, because I can remember it. I have to think here a little bit. Reuben is 2 years older than me. He was born March the 4th, 1923, a month ahead of me in the year, 2 years older than I am. Here he is, 57 years old, would have been, yet it seems only yesterday that he was around when we was teenagers doing a few things. I guess, as I think back, Reuben was neither a saint nor an angel or a little devil. He was an average boy, but he was a good guy. And I don't remember much when we were small, but I do remember that it seemed like in the family we paired off. There were 3 girls before Reuben, and he was the first boy, and I was the second. And I remember as we got a little older, Fred and Elmer seemed to go together, and some of the other kids. And I and Reuben used to do a few things together, yet there was a lot of times we didn't. I remember I was sort of a tag-along brother with Reuben, with his friends. There was a lot of boys Reuben's age, but there wasn't very many my age as we grew up. As I go back, I remember being in the big house across the road, and we had a great big Christmas. This when we were little kids. I don't remember how old, but I imagine we were less than 10. And we both got, among a lot of other things, a wagon. Reuben had a red one, and I had an orange one. And as the year went by, somehow the sides of my wagon got broke off, so I just had the bottom of the bed on wheels. We went pulling our wagons down the road one day and come up against the fence. Reuben climbed up on the fence and jumped down on mine and bent the middle of it clear to the ground. I remember I sure felt bad about that. There were little incidents like this as we played and worked. I remember him being the oldest and me the next, he'd kind of always be the boss when Dad would send us out to do some work. We spent a lot of time working, digging ditches, piling hay, cutting the hay. Reuben usually got to drive the horse and the mower, and I got to pile it, because he was the oldest. I remember we used to go out here in the back where Lyman has the old house, and that house that he's half a house. And I remember we used to get balls for Christmas, sponge balls. Some would be red, about as big as a baseball, some green, some yellow, blue. We all had one, and we got a bat. And of course, in them days, the church didn't have any organized basketball or softball or anything. You made your own fun. So one of us would go up and bat. None of us had any ball gloves. We'd stand out in the field, and first one that caught 3 got to go in and bat. I remember a lot of days we had fun doing this. During the week, when we'd work on the farm, we used to go down by the old bridge and in the farm and go swimming in the canal. We used to have a lot of fun. Sometimes a lot of things would come down the canal, like old turkeys. Even pigs had been killed and thrown in there. Still, we'd go down there and swim, because that was more fun than taking a bath in a tin tub. I think back when I wasn't too old. I don't remember. I guess I was in one of the real low grades, first, second, or third. Reuben was a little older, and he started sloughing school with his cousin Kenneth Hicks and Glenn Strasburg, and I think Merlin Larson was in on it. Leslie Grossbeck, Vernon Green, and a lot of them. They sloughed school and over by the old Lehigh mill, the sugar factory mill, and go swimming. The word got home, I think through Eva, that "Where's Reuben in school?" She told Dad. Dad confronted Reuben with this one night, when he come home. Says, "Where have you been?" "To school." "Like hell," Dad says. "You ain't been to school. Where have you been?" So he says, "Well, we went swimming over at the old sugar factory." I remember Dad grabbed him by the arm and took his razor strap and whacked him a couple of good times across the seat. Reuben hollered and yelled. When I seen what was happening, I decided right then and there I better not slough, because I didn't want that. So, this kind of maybe the beginning where Reuben was always kind of my example. He led out, I followed. I remember, I guess when we were 15, 17, 16 in that age, we organized a softball team in Highland. We used to go up and practice by where the old country club is, or across from Johnny Greenland, down in Ludwig Larson's field or in Boyd Stice's pasture. Then we'd go to Lehigh and play the colleges, and they had a field there up by the garbage dump. There's a lot of guys Reuben's age, the Becks, like I've mentioned some of the others. And I guess I was the only youngest one on the team, and they needed me to make up enough players. I'd play out in left field. And over there in Lehigh, left field was over a hill. And I remember when I'd get down there, I couldn't even see the guy batting, so I'd walk up the hill. If he'd hit the ball, then I'd run down the hill and try to catch it and throw it in. Reuben was a pitch. Reuben was, the way I remembered, was the best athlete there. Could hit the ball. He was a great pitch. He kind of was the backbone of the whole team. We had a lot of fun. I guess all kids need something to do, and being on a team and being around your friends. This done it. For no other reason, we'd go to church to find out when the next practice and when the next game was. I remember a lot of times Reuben would get me out by the barn, and we had kind of a poor mitt, and I'd catch for him, and he'd have me sit there and catch till my hand would hurt, get numb, like beating it with a sledgehammer. He'd throw the ball so hard. And when he was younger, he used to have a paper out. He'd deliver the Salt Lake Tribune early in the morning all around Highland. Clear up to the canyon, clear back down, over to, through the hollow to Leonard Hyde, Bill Hyde, to Chapman over in the corner, Ken White, and back to Larson's and home. I remember I was about a 12 or 14 mile deal. He used to ride his bike delivered in the summer. And eventually I got one and helped him at times. But in the winter we had to ride a horse. On Sunday, I'd have to get on him behind the saddle and go into different places and sell the Sunday paper. I think it was a dime. I remember I used to hate them Sundays to come around. I'd get so galled that I couldn't hardly walk, sore in the crotch from riding behind that saddle. Just about get better and it'd be Sunday again and time to go help him sell the papers. I remember Reuben would wake up in the morning. We used to sleep in the attic over there in Dad's old house. He'd always take a glass of cold water up and throw it in his face and wake himself up and get up about 5 and go deliver the paper before he went to school. Remember he had to come home and milk his cows and do some other chores too before he went to school. I think all this was for $4 or $5 a month, and then some people wouldn't pay. Reuben was devoted. He took the job and he stuck with it, and he was an example to all us other boys in the family. I remember Dad used to send he and I and Fred and sometimes Elmer out in the field to do some work. I remember one time especially we was out there pulling weeds and digging a ditch by hand and shoveling out because Dad wanted a good ditch up through the middle of the field. Fred, he decided he'd had enough and decided to go home, and Reuben grabbed him and kicked his hind end and told him he can stay, and so he put on a big bawling deal. Finally let him go. I stayed with it for another hour or so, and I decided I'm kind of tired of digging this ditch. I think I'll let him kick my backside and go. But when I tried it, he kicked me and made me stay and help him anyhow. In fact, there was a few times, of course, Fred was younger, but I think old Fred got pretty smart. He decided he'd rather kick in the seat than have to do all that work, so he pulled that quite a few times. Reuben had whacking good, but I never could get away with it because he wasn't about to stay and do it all alone. Remember one time we was out there, Dad had the ground all plowed. We went out and we pulled tumbleweeds and red roots and built big piles of weeds. About every 20 feet we had a pile, 10, 15 feet high of weeds. We was out there digging them, and one day a little rabbit run out. As it run away, Reuben took the fork and threw it in the air in a big arch. Chance in a million, but it come down and stuck through the rabbit, pinned it to the ground. We all run over. I believe that's, at least in my case, when I seen that poor rabbit there in Reuben, we all felt bad. I think we learned there and there not to be cruel to animals. Of course, when we was young boys, there was a time when the Depression hit. Dad lost everything across the road and moved over to where he is now. That was when only half the house was there, the chicken coop looking part. And a lot of people got to making fun of us at school, and I don't know, if it hadn't been for Reuben always protecting me, I'm afraid I'd have got killed. Some of the older boys would get some of the other kids to get me and beat up on me or shove my head in the snow. School was hell in them days. But Reuben made it so I could stand it, because I knew he might save me some of these times. And he did. I remember he'd grab some of those kids and tell them to leave me alone, and they were scared of him. And so I tried not to get too far away from where he'd be in case I needed some help. Life goes on, and a lot of little things like this. Remember going down to work just for Reuben died when he was 18. We was down to Alvy Green's, and we were riding on the hay rack. And Reuben kept holding his side, and I said, "What's the matter, Reuben?" And he says, "Oh, it hurts a little." Maybe I should go back and explain. About a week, 10 days before this, he was going to go on a date with Virginia Larson, with Merlin Larson, and his girlfriend. As Reuben went down here by Maud Greenland's through the hollow, a kid his age named Leo Strasburg was coming over the edge of the hollow without any lights on, and they had an accident. And there was a steering knob on the old Ford we had, and I think that's what hit Reuben in the stomach. Anyhow, it hurt his stomach, but he said he was all right. Went down and pulled the car home, but his side hurt him from then on. This, when we was riding in the wagon, was only the climax, I guess. Finally, his appendix was giving him a bad time, so we come home. I remember how sad I felt when he was sick, and Dad and Mother took him down to the hospital. And the doctors took tests. Of course, this was before the miracle drugs come out. If it happened 2 years later, why, penicillin probably saved his life. But the doctor says, well, the tests don't show any hurry, so they waited till morning to operate on his appendix. But when they did, his appendix was broken. And within a week, 10 days, gangrene had set in, and he eventually died. This was just before World War II broke out. I always felt like maybe this saved him from it, because he would have been in the middle of it probably. But I remember going down to the hospital and seeing him, and he was in the room. He said his feet had gone cold and numb. He waved to me. They wanted me to go right in the room. Dad and Mother was sitting there. He smiled and said hello to me. I thought, oh, he'll be all right. But a few days was otherwise. Of course, I missed him a lot because he kind of went and done things with his friends, and they'd always let me tag along. Sometimes he'd tell me to stay home, and the other guys say, come on. I remember a lot of times, there's quite a few times, summer, the gang of them would go and steal some watermelons, and then we'd all eat them. We'd do it right in the middle of the day. I think people just planted them so we'd have some. Anyhow, Reuben was full of jokes and stuff all the time. And so, what I'm saying is, not trying to say Reuben was perfect. He done the same things other boys did, but I don't remember him doing anything real bad. We all got in on this watermelon business and playing jokes on Halloween and things like that. Seems like I've said about all I had to say, and there doesn't seem like there's very much. Of course, we were just kids then, and I was only 16 when Reuben died. And I think back about a lot of little things as we played, but I don't know how to describe anything. I remember him, and he and I doing a lot of things together, but when I try to think of how to describe it, the honest truth, I just don't know how. So I guess, unless I can think of something else, this is about it.